Hello. In this video, I'm going to show how to authenticate a front-end app, a front-end React app using PocketBase as the backend. So PocketBase is a really simple all-in-one backend solution that hasn't quite reached 1.0. It's sort of somewhat experimental, but it is being used in production by a lot of apps. And the nice thing is it's really simple and it's one cross-platform application. So I'm going to download the Windows version so I can just run this right on my OS. And what I'll do is open the folder, extract it, and then I can just have a terminal inside of this folder, and I'll have the /PocketBase executable, and I could say like -h for help to get the instructions. So I'll come back and run that in a second. But to work on the front end, I'm going to use this template that is a public template, so you can create your own repositories based on this. But I'm just going to clone this and edit it so that I can use the basic layout that it has. So if you click on the pages site, it's just an app, and it has a page title that's a link to, I guess in this case, my top level pages site, but it has some main content with a useless button and a footer. So I will pull that down with by cd into my, I'll do another terminal, cd into my code, my web folder, and I'll git clone this as, let's just say, PocketBase auth client, and then I'll code into PocketBase auth client. So the basic idea here is I just want to get something that will be able to log in with a login form and then show that the user is logged in when they are, and be able to also log out. So that's pretty simple, and we can use the PocketBase APIs for this. Now there are client-side SDKs, software development kit, for JavaScript, but I want to just use basic fetch calls because it does support a standard REST API, and that's going to be more applicable to things that aren't PocketBase and contexts where you don't want to or can't install the PocketBase SDK. So if you look at how to use PocketBase and maybe authentication, you can see that you can authenticate with a password, but they're suggesting that you use the SDK. I'm just going to click this web API reference to see how do you auth with the password as just a basic post request, and then you go to this API collections, the collection name, auth with password, and then you give your identity, your password, and an optional identity field. So to do that, I'm going to first just get this client-side app started with npm I, and then I'll do an npm run dev to start the app. So here's the app with the useless button. And now I can start editing this main content. So if we look for the main JSX, it has this app component, which is the main content for the home page. So I'm just going to say that this is the login form, and I will wrap it in a form. And instead of having an action, I'll have an on submit, and I'll make it handle submit as the handler, and I'll have to write that. Function handle submit takes event, prevents default for now, and just does nothing essentially to start. Make sure I drag this form all the way around here, and Then inside here I can start to put the different form elements. So I'll make a label for the email input, and I'll call this email. Then I'll make a label for the password input as well. Then I'll go ahead and make that input type of email so that I get form validation on that and make it required. Also give it a placeholder to user@example.com. And do the same thing for password, except it's going to be type password so that we'll get those dots that don't show the password, just like that. Oh, and it's filling my password here because I've filled this earlier. I'll just go ahead and delete this. So there we go. And to get a little bit of a better view, I'll just add some CSS to make the label under the form. So form where a label that's directly under a form to make it display block, to just do the standard layout that you might expect. And I also have some larger sizing on button and root. I'll just add that to input so that that gets a bit bigger as well. Now I can handle what happens on the submit here. So the event, I can get the data from object.entries from entries of a new form data for the event.target. So that's just going to take all of the names of these and put the data there. So we'll have to give the name of email, and we'll have to give the name of this as password. So then when we submit the form, what should happen is we can just console.log the data. So if we inspect and watch the console, do a@a.com, and a is the password, and hit enter, currently nothing is happening, but we also don't have a submit button. So let's do a button with a type of submit. Call it login. And we'll also have this style on form button. Just give form button a little bit of margin, block the vertical CSS. So let's see now, if I do a@a.com and log in, I get that data coming through as just an object, which is nice. Now if I were to not have this be a well-formed email, I should get a validation error because the type is email, so I automatically get that validation for free. If I want to save my password, I could do a@a.com and then put some password here, but we're going to need to create it in the back end first. So let's switch over and start up the back end and see what happens here. So when you initially start up the back end, it's going to restrict who can call this. You can't just call from any origin. So this is localhost 5173 origin. So it will be restricted automatically talking to this backend, but we can easily change that. So just to get it started, you do PocketBase serve, and that will open this admin portal with a token so that you can create your admin. So I'll call it admin at admin.com, and password will be a very insecure password of 1 through 9 and 0. And I'll save this password. Now it automatically creates a user table. You can create different tables. They're called collections for whatever you want. But for now, we're just going to work with the users table. So the users table has ID, email, email visibility, and so on. I'll create a new record in there, and I'll call the email a@a.com and make the password. I'll let it generate me a password. So I'll copy that, paste that there, and then the name can be A first name and A last name. Those are optional, but I'm gonna just throw that in there. And I can save that, but I think it's gonna go to the wrong. Yeah, it's gonna go to right here instead of the correct origin. So there's really no point in having that here. We can go back and at this, we're going to paste in the password and just click login. I'm just going to save that password so I know it. So that's the password that should log me in as this particular user. So if you look at the front end, what we're going to have to do is submit a fetch request to the correct endpoint when we click login. So that would be the users collection, and we're going to auth with password. So the auth collection is probably called users. And so that's how we're going to determine whether the user should get let in on the back end. And that's going to happen automatically, hopefully. So I'm just going to pull in this information here to help Copilot help me. And I'm going to go into here and create a new folder called services. And there's going to be a new file in here called login.js. And I'll paste this for context. And what I'm going to do is export default async function called login. And it's going to take an object with the username and password, just like we get from the form, or the email and password. And so if the email or password is empty, then we will throw an error that the login service requires an email and password. Sure. And then we're going to get a const URL equals something, and const options is an object. So the URL is going to have to come from first I'll just put it up here, const API URL is going to be HTTP no S for this, and it's going to be localhost 8080 because that's where the server is running, or 8090. And then to that, we're going to add /collections users, the auth, which is the auth table, or the auth collection, and then auth with password. And for the options, we're going to need to specify that this fetch request is a post request, and the content is going to be application JSON that we're sending. So we'll send the body, and the identity is email, and the password is password. So next we can return fetch of the URL and the options, and we can promise chain. So if the response isn't okay, we can throw a new error. Say network response was not okay. That seems fine. And if data.record, I don't really know what's going to happen there. So we'll just say response.json. Oh, that's already being returned there, response.json. So this should be a good starter. So now we can import that. Import login from services login.js. So that's going to be an async login function. We will just essentially try to log in, and then based on what happens, we can console.log the results. So let's submit a wrong password here, and it's not going to matter because oh no, it's fine listening to us. So the origin, by default, it's going to allow all origins. It might just be because it's localhost too. But if we wanted to be really safe, we could do serve HTTP and then 0.0.0.0:8090 to make sure that anyone, any IP address can connect, even if it wasn't on the local host, as long as the local host is exposed externally. So then we're getting a bad request, which means that it is connecting, but it's not correct. And so we need to see why exactly that is. So when response is not okay, let's console.log the response. So the response says bad request, and it says the URL, it says the status, which is for bad request. It doesn't really give us any other information than that. If we go to the over here, we can't see why that's happening, but if we add --debug, or yeah, I think it's -h, let's check. If we add the dev, then we can see what happens on each request. So as we do this, we know we're hitting, but it says invalid login credentials. If we reload the page and get our auto-filled password, then we see everything went fine, and we got back this successful login here. So we get a record, which is the user row for this user. This is their name, this is the email, and different, created and updated dates. It says verified false, probably because in the UI panel we didn't verify it, but we can do that manually as an admin. So I'll say that they're verified, and then relog in. Now you see they're verified, and we're getting this token. So this token is then how you can authenticate future requests, by providing that token in the header of your requests. So we have to somehow save that token. The way that we'll get that is from .token on the response. or essentially not the response, but the data here. So the data.token, if we log in with the correct password, we're going to get that token. And so this is the place that we have to handle anything that goes wrong. If the login fails, we probably want to tell the user, maybe we can just do an alert that the login failed. And we don't need to tell them the whole error. Maybe login failed, try again. So if they log in incorrectly, we can tell them. If they log in correctly, we'll get the token and do something with it. So now we have to make something to use the token. So I'm going to create a new folder called hooks and create a new file called use auth token.js, and this is going to import use state and use effect from React, so we can use those and create a custom hook based on those hooks. So hooks are just functions essentially, so we'll export default function use auth token, and what this is going to do is get and save from local storage the token. And so it's going to have const token set token is use state, and the default value is going to be window.localstorage.getItem, and then whatever the key for that token is. So the key we can take as a parameter, say key, and give it a default value of, say, pb auth token. And then we can get item based on this token. So that'll just initialize the state variable. But it's possible that the state variable can change. So we should do a use effect that says every time this hook loads, so every time the component it's in loads, essentially, we'll do something. And that something is defined in a function where the return value is another function of what to do when you clean up or you unmount that, unmount this component or this hook. And what we want to do is we also have to pass the empty array, so that this means not listening to any particular variables, but just overall when the hook itself loads. We'll also create another effect, use effect for when the token changes, because we're going to let our callers of this hook essentially change the token. So we'll return the same things sort of that use state would do, token and set token. So you might think, well, why does it matter they're doing this? We're going to be adding functionality so that automatically when they change the token, it can save it to local storage. So the way to do that, one thing we want to do is add a window dot add event listener, and on the storage event, if the key for the storage event is equal to the key that we're interested in, so the PB auth token. So if somebody else, another tab, or maybe we're playing in the developer tools, if someone else changes the local storage, then we want to check the key that was affected. And if the key that was affected was this key, then we want to set our local state variable to the new value of that. Then in the return value, we want to remove that event listener so that we are cleaning up after everything exits. So it's just going to take the same event listener as this. And if we wanted to have that be a little more simpler, we could call this function on storage event. We called this. and then the window add event listener would be storage on storage event, and the remove event listener would be storage on storage event. So it's the same exact function being removed. Now when the token changes, whether it's because of set token called by the caller or whether it's the set token called here, we want the local storage to get updated. But we could accidentally create an infinite loop if we have a storage event, we set the token, and then the token triggers this, and then we use this to set local storage, we trigger an infinite loop. So we have to make sure that those two things aren't equal. So first we'll say const storage value is window local storage get item for that key. So what's the value that's currently in local storage? And then we'll say if the token that we have in state is different from local storage, then if the token is defined, we'll set the key to this token value. Whereas if it's not defined or it's an empty string, then we want to remove the item from local storage. So essentially if we've nulled this out, if we've set token to null or undefined or empty string, then we just want to remove the item from local storage. And by checking to make sure that only when these are different do we do these things, then we don't have that, hopefully we don't have that infinite loop triggered. So unless we made any mistakes, this should cover the token hook that will automatically get from local storage and automatically save to local storage as we call the set token function, and it will provide us that token as the token variable. Then we can go in our main JSX and import the use auth token from hooks use auth token JS, and that has to be at the top level of React component because it's a hook. So we'll say token set token is use auth token, and this is the key value, but it's also would work if we didn't pass it because we have it as default. So we'll do pb auth token, and then when this here happens, we will say set token to data.token. And if everything worked properly on the application tab in local storage, we should have login triggering the setting of this token. And then when we reload, we will have this, if we put a use effect here, that looked, something like one of these plain use effects, like this. If we put a use effect here, and we need to import that, just the basic use effect that does nothing. Then we add, say, a console.log of token. We're just going to reload the page. We haven't logged in yet. We have the token, quote unquote, changing. The token value when this use effect is running, it's coming from local storage. It's already defined even before we've hit login because it's getting pulled by that hook into this state variable. And that's the advantage. We can also listen only for when token changes, and we could, for example, like set token to anything. So say when we have an error, we set the token to ABC, for example. So we log in, we get an error, token change to ABC. And if we check the application tab as well, you'll see the values ABC in local storage. So what we can do then is we can handle when the token is defined, then we can return a different view, a logged in view. So if token, then we'll just return, sure, you're already logged in. or authenticated view. Let's wrap this in a fragment. And you would never really want to show the user the token, but let's just, to show this, we can say the PB token is and then we'll create a logout button that just disregards that token, sets the token state to null, which would set the local storage to null, or remove the key from local storage altogether, and then that would trigger this other return value of the login form where the user could then log back in. So we log in, we see this, we log out, we see this, and it even works if we log in, we reload the page, we're going to continue to be authenticated until this token goes invalid, because or really, even if this token doesn't go invalid, we won't know because we're not checking. We're not talking to the backend and asking if the token's valid. We're just checking if we have that in local storage. So what you might do is call the refresh or the checking endpoint to see if this is expired when the page loads, to make sure that you're still authenticated. And if you're not still authenticated, then you might set the token to null to trigger the user to log back in. But here you can see a basic conditional rendering where if a certain state variable is one way, then we show the user one thing, whereas if it's another way, we show them a different thing. And that's a way that you can control login state and just talk to a backend in a very simple way. So that should conclude this video. Thank you for watching.